Here's Jeff Paterson, our Canucks reporter, host of Rink-Wide Vancouver. We're in Saturday after a loss to the Seattle Kraken, Jeff, but practice Sunday is where I want to begin because the captain was absent. Your information here and thoughts about Quinn Hughes, what he's fighting through, and his availability going forward.
Yeah, we're led to believe that this is a new injury, not related to the oblique that kept him out for the 6 games in the Four Nations. So that is not good news on the Quinn Hughes front. Officially day-to-day, but boy, we've heard that a lot from the Vancouver Canucks, and take that for what it's worth. Monday, a day off, back on the practice ice on Tuesday, and we'll see if there's any developments there. I wasn't surprised given the fact that Quinn didn't play the final 10 minutes in Seattle on Saturday. 3 games in 4 nights for him. The extra time it took him to peel himself off the ice after I think it was the 2-2 goal. You could see he was in some distress there. I think we're getting to a point here, and obviously it's such a crucial week with the trade deadline. But if the Canucks indicate in any way that they are sellers, you do wonder if the best course of action wouldn't be to put the captain on ice for a while here. This isn't about what he can do down the stretch for them. This is big picture about keeping their best player completely healthy and making sure that these injuries don't mount, that bad situation doesn't get worse. So, I wasn't surprised when I showed up at the rink and Quinn Hughes wasn't on the ice. The guy I was hoping to see was Thatcher Demko, because it's been 3 weeks plus now since he left the game against Toronto. We were told he'd be reevaluated after the road trip. Rick Tocchet did reveal that he's been skating on his own, but in terms of his readiness to join the group for practice and beyond that game action, all of that still remains up in the air for Thatcher Demko and the Vancouver Canucks.
Do their deadline plans have to change if Quinn Hughes is going to miss some time?
I think the answer should be no, that Quinn Hughes' situation shouldn't impact them at all, but it very well may. They're given all indications that they should be sellers. I just don't see any way around this right now that, they go 1-4 on this road trip. Calgary scores 1 goal in 3 games on a road trip and gets a point necessary in Carolina to move back in front of the Vancouver Canucks. The Flames, with 1 goal in 3 games, somehow have moved back in front of the Vancouver Canucks. And that just kind of tells you the way that the Canucks are spinning their wheels here. Again, I keep thinking that I don't know what the end game is sneaking into the playoffs as the second wild card and running straight into Winnipeg or Vegas. This team cannot score goals. That's happened. It's been that way for a while now. I guess for me, the bigger concern is all of a sudden cracks forming in this defensive posture and structure that they thought that they could choke the life out of opponents, and were doing that just before the Four Nations break. The hope was that Quinn would get back and, hey, everything was going to be great. To give up 5 to Anaheim and then 6 to Seattle. I mean, there aren't that many teams below the Vancouver Canucks in the Western Conference standings, and those are 2 of them, and they ended up pumping the Canucks for way too many goals. So all of that combined, Matt, I think leads me back to this idea that Quinn Hughes, no Quinn Hughes, the direction of this team still remains very much a mystery to me. It just feels like if you have sellable assets here, it's go time this week. That the idea of spending assets to support this group in its current form just doesn't make any sense.
The schedule is so unkind, too, going forward, that bringing back a Quinn Hughes at 75% because he can theoretically play. So, he'll get... I mean, he's not going to get any healthier playing more than every other night over the course of the rest of the month.
Right, and it was so clear that even though he was back in the lineup, he was nowhere close to 100%. No. He was on the ice for 4 of the 5 goals that Anaheim scored. He was on for 3 of the goals that Seattle scored before they sat him down there at the end of the bench. That's not Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes defends by spending his entire night in the offensive end, spinning circles and skating around guys. To see him and Philip Hronek, and boy, Hronek, who has been really good for the Canucks. I think his best stretch of hockey over the last month. He had a rough one on Saturday, and I don't know if it was workload catching up to him, if he was trying to compensate because he knew that the captain wasn't in full health and at top form, but I thought Philip Hronek really struggled. And so if that's your top pair, and they're getting worked the way they did by the Kraken, there's a trickle-down effect, obviously, and then you're down in the game, and you'd like to lean on Quinn Hughes in those situations, but I think the Canucks showed some judgment, and I was glad to see that, rather than running Quinn Hughes out for 10 or 12 minutes of the third period, as they've done in the past when they're down in hockey games. They recognize that there's just nothing in the tank right now for Quinn Hughes, and there was a risk of furthering this new injury situation. So they took their lumps in the third period. They come home with their tails between their legs, 1 win in 4 games. Guys, they didn't score a third period goal on the road trip. Like, there's a lot about this hockey club. They had a second period lead in all 5 of the games, didn't score a third period goal, and as a result, they got the overtime win after they had flushed the 2-0 lead in Los Angeles. That's all they have to show for these 5 games out of the break. So, yeah, I mean, the offense remains an issue. The top end, Rick Tocchet, we were talking about practice. Rick Tocchet on Sunday spoke at length and didn't name names, but it was so clear. You could have just injected Elias Pettersson into just about every answer he gave about needing more from the top end guys, needing guys to shoot the puck, needing guys to, you name it, essentially. Talked about losing faceoffs. So certainly one of the goals, the Matty Beniers goal in Seattle, was a direct loss of Pettersson, and then let Beniers just sneak past him and tip that puck in. So again, it comes back to this idea that the coach is clearly frustrated, but I think he's sort of gritting his teeth and not trying to pour gasoline on this fire right now, but you can just sense the frustration post-game on Saturday, and then again back at Rogers Arena on Sunday.
I think both things are true here. Elias Pettersson is a big reason why the Canucks are where they are. I don't think there's much debate in that. And yet, I think there's still some culpability Rick Tocchet's way. It is part of the coach's job to get the best out of each player, and merely him being frustrated is not going to be enough. And then, as you talked about, the defensive structure has left them all of a sudden as well. This is a guy that does not have a contract extension here. How much longer till that's the headline, across, the Vancouver Canucks?
Well, quite frankly, I'm surprised that it hasn't been a front burner issue, but I think with all the drama that they've had and now the trade deadline and some of these individual struggles and the Quinn Hughes news, it just feels like every day there's a story or two that have sort of leaped past it on the depth chart of Vancouver Canucks drama. But you're right, through all of this, and that's why I maintain if this coach doesn't make the playoffs, if this team doesn't make the playoffs, I think all bets are off. And Farhan said on Rink Wide on Saturday, like, he doesn't see a way that Rick Tocchet and Elias Pettersson both come back next year. And I tend to agree with that something's got to give. You've jacked the ticket prices already. That much we know. How do you sell all of this to this fan base that's already pretty damn frustrated? I do think that there's going to have to be some change, and whether that's personnel, whether it's the coach, we'll see. And you're right. Like, Rick Tocchet shouldn't escape all of this. He talked post-game in Seattle and again Sunday about moments. And I don't disagree that you can look at key moments in just about every hockey game. But he seemed to suggest that all the moments were going, the way of the opponent. Well, look at the overtime in Los Angeles on Wednesday. They kill off a penalty. That was a moment. And it'll allow them to stay in the hockey game and ultimately win it in overtime. They had a power play at 2-2 in Anaheim when the Ducks had all the momentum in the second period. Score there, and maybe that's a moment. Instead, they didn't. And the Ducks ended up going in front and running away from the Canucks. The other night in Seattle, guys, Dakota Joshua scores a shorthanded beauty to break a 2-2 tie. That should have been a moment for the Vancouver Canucks. But how many shows have we done together here where we've talked about this team getting players back from injury or, should have got a boost, either big picture or in a game itself, and they just throw up all over themselves. Like, they can't help themselves. They cannot deal, it feels like, with any sort of success that they have. But that should have been a bigger moment in that hockey game. Dakota Joshua, who I think is showing some strides here. I think he's had it wasn't a great road trip for the team, but I do think individually we saw some signs of life and some signs of last year's Dakota Joshua, so that part's promising. But that goal in a 2-2 game, a shorthanded goal, penalty kill's been good for the Canucks. That was sort of a cherry on top, and instead they just flush that and go meekly into the night down in the Emerald City. So it's not all moments for the other team. There are moments there for the Vancouver Canucks. They just don't do much with them.
Ask you the Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. Sorry, Blake. I thought you had something lined up there. The rare time where neither of us have something to say. We're asking in our poll question, who do you want traded by Friday's deadline? Brock Besser, Elias Pettersson, both neither. I know you're not a want. guy, Jeff. But talk to me, Elias Pettersson on Friday. Do you think he's a Canuck past the deadline?
I do. I don't see a contending team thinking that that's a deal that they want to make right now. And let's be clear, 1 assist in 5 games on the road trip, like that's where he is. But it goes way beyond that with the shots and the lack of shot attempts and the hesitation and that first period power play. I just don't see a good team thinking, yeah, that's the piece we need. We're going to go all in and make that trade. It's a complicated trade, obviously, with the contract. And a team that is looking to shake things up, I think they can wait until the offseason here. So I just don't think that there's going to be a lineup of teams knocking on the Canucks' door to get their hands on Elias Pettersson. So I think he gets through the deadline here. But Matt, I saw your response on X about Brock Besser, and I tend to agree. Like, if you could tell me that the person could stay past the deadline and get back to his goal-scoring ways and be a productive contributor for the Vancouver Canucks, 6 years, I think I'd probably be willing to do that on an extension. Beyond that, I get the hesitation on the part of the hockey club. But Brock had 1 assist in 5 games on the road trip and was remarkably quiet. And then to see Rick Tocchet put both Pettersson and Besser together and sort of lump your problems, I'm not sure that was the best way out for either one of them. So, yeah, I just think, again, the direction that this club is headed right now, if you have a tradable asset and you look at the market and what's out there and available, and Brock's a proven playoff commodity now, yes, it feels like the weight of the situation is certainly hovering over him. I think it is contributing to his lack of production and just his overall lack of performance here. But if there's a first-round pick, a first-round and a prospect on the table for this player, I think the Vancouver Canucks have no choice but to jump at that.
Wednesday's game against Anaheim looms pretty large if there's no Besser resolution. I imagine he will get some sort of acknowledgement from the crowd, and I'm sitting here wondering if he's going to get emotional on Wednesday. If the crowd picks a farewell Brock moment or rises up for Brock Besser.
Not that this matters, but there haven't been a whole lot of rumors about him yet.
No, I know.
So it doesn't seem like he's front burner, but still, you never know.
I hear you, Matt. My hunch is that you won't get that sort of groundswell. Usually it's reserved for a player coming back after the fact, first visit back to Vancouver. I get it's a savvy hockey market. People understand the situation. I don't foresee that. And again, you get through Wednesday, you've got all of Thursday, you got Friday morning. Things can happen in a hurry here. And I know there were reports last week that the Canucks had gone 5 years and $8 million, and that wasn't enough for Besser. And I totally understand that. That would be leaving a ton of dough on the table. Mm-hmm. But I guess there's a part of me that thinks there's probably one last and final coming from the Vancouver Canucks, and it may tack on one more year. And at that point, how much does he love Vancouver? How much does he love the only NHL city that he's known? How much does he believe in this management group and ownership and all those types of things? The player certainly gets a say in this. And so we'll see where it goes. So I think we'll save the grand farewell until, it's official. And it's wild right now, guys. I mean, you see it, I see it on social. Like, even the insiders don't really have a true sense of how this thing is going to play out by week's end.
Well, what Dreger told us, they're not going to be aggressive on the rental market, which, yes, makes sense. But, yeah, they've got so many moving parts here. Pettersson, Besser, Carson Soucy.
The UFAs are really curious for me here because, like, the Philadelphia Flyers are talking about trading away Scott Laughton. Philadelphia Flyers are 4 points back of the playoffs. Yeah, there's 300 teams that have a small chance of making the playoffs in the East, but they are one of them.
But that's a designed full team rebuild that Briere brought out last year. But and they've already traded.
But the Canucks have to ask themselves tough questions there too, right? Like, that's what I'm saying. You wouldn't think the Canucks are in that same position.
Not by Friday.
But guys like Suter, he's officially broken through the cellophane ceiling of 14 and 15 goals over the last 4 seasons. He's at the gaudy number of 16. He could score 30 now by the end of the season, now that he's broken through. But he's on a career year. All of a sudden, you got a guy that's a UFA that's having a career year. You could usually trade that guy, but it doesn't sound like they have the appetite to do so, Jeff.
No, we touched on him on Friday. He scored in back-to-back games all of a sudden, and you're right, up to 16. So 20 certainly seems like it would be within his reach if he stuck here, even on a low-scoring Canucks team. You'd like to think he could get 4 more before the end of this season. It's funny, like he's such a low-maintenance guy, low-key. It doesn't feel like the kind of player that other teams maybe are seeking, certainly other fan bases are clamoring for, and yet he's such a useful performer that I think he could help any team. So, behind the scenes, maybe the Canucks are taking some calls there. But I said to you on Friday, if you trade him, I just don't think Ratu's ready to step in and give you all the things that Suter does. 16 goals, sure, but it's the penalty killing as well. And he's part of the first unit over the boards to kill penalties every night for the Canucks. And penalty kill's been really good, and he's been a huge part of that. So if you trade him, then you're just out there searching for the next one when maybe you've got... Now, we haven't heard a whole lot about the Canucks having discussions with him on an extension either. And so without knowing the price point there... that clouds this whole discussion, but something tells me that Suter is going to make it through the trade deadline here. Even if people think, there should be a fire sale, I think he survives and is a Canuck beyond Friday.
Jeff, I know you're the do something guy. Are you prepared if the Canucks do nothing by Friday?
I'm not the do nothing guy. I'm not the do nothing guy. Trust me.
Could this be a do nothing?
I have trouble processing that. You've thrown a curve at me.
But honestly, guys, like they're sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They don't want to bring in rentals. They don't really want to move Rock because it hurts their chances. Susie may say no on the no move. Pettersson could be a summer thing. Suter and Forbert just run them through. Maybe there's a mini extension there. Is there a real possibility of do nothing here for the full week?
Sure, I think there is. And we have seen this organization, go back a decade with Radim Verbata and Dan Hamhuis. I mean, that still stings. Now, the Twins were in a different boat, and they had earned the right to chart their course in the end of their career. But really, the only time that the Canucks have been sellers was Alex Burrows and Jannik Hansen, and that didn't work out in the big picture. I mean, they got pieces that, kind of petered out and fizzled. So we've seen this. We've seen this from this organization. A couple of management groups. What's the through line there? I suppose it's same ownership group, right? And this idea of stripping it right down. So, there's a part of me, as much as I don't like the idea, because I do think this road trip and this weekend particularly showed that I just don't see the forward momentum. I get people will give you the just get in and things can happen and upsets. That's what we love sports. I just don't see this group as currently constructed as low scoring as it is. The lowest scoring, they're tied with San Jose, lowest scoring third period team in hockey. They've got the third worst third period differential. They're the only team in the NHL that hasn't come back when trailing after 2 periods. You're down in playoff games. It happens. You're facing good opponents. Of course you're going to be down in games. I just don't see the ingredients in this mix that would make these playoffs compelling. So as much as I love playoff hockey, I'm not feeling it with this group. And therefore, again, right now it just feels like all roads lead back to being sellers.
They have 3 trophy eligible players, 3, that you would guess. 2 of them are injured, and one of them is not physically absent, but mentally. It's not looking good.
It is been a hell of a year.
Yeah.
Jeff, good stuff. We'll be tuning in to Rinkwide Wednesday after the Ducks, and you'll be joining us Friday after we know the score here on trade deadline. So looking forward to that, my friend.
Yeah, and I think an interesting week of practice, obviously, with the Quinn Hughes situation. So back to work for the Vancouver Canucks on Tuesday. We'll be there, and we'll certainly be monitoring that situation and see if we get a Thatcher Demko sighting as well at some point over this week.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.